Hi, I'm Vince and welcome to my Vinceunlimited channel. In this video today, I'm going to tell you all about the third bike I had. I've already told the story of the GLera 50 moped I used and of my first motorbike, my Yamaha DT175. If you haven't yet seen these, you can watch them by following the links I've placed below. And why not put your thumb on the subscribe button while you're down there as well? That really helps my channel. Back to today's video, and I will tell you why I made this unusual biking choice. I'll go through many of the quarter-litre machines available at the time. I'll then explain how I tried to make it a better bike, ending my tale with how it and I managed to get into a knife fight with a mate. So here goes, my Honda CB200, not a dream machine. With age comes experience. The trouble was that when I purchased my second motorcycle, I still lacked both. The year was 1979. I'd just turned 18 and had already cut my teeth on motorbikes, along with other parts of my body as well, and I was ready to move on. You may have already seen the video of my Yamaha trail bike that I was selling. Within the year of ownership, it just couldn't handle the way my biking days were developing. I needed a new steed. More of my friends had graduated from their mopeds, and I didn't want to be left behind with all the high-powered horses that were amassing around me. I say high-powered, all were under 250cc, as this was the usual starting point for the teenagers in those days. Something to do with the fact that 251cc or more was deemed far too powerful with newish riders by anonymous men in grey suits. Plus the Yamaha trail bike itself just wasn't designed to carry two, and my loins were calling out for company. So I set about searching for my next bike and considered all the realistic 250 options available. I could have chosen a bigger bike, but just like Pelicans, bigger bikes come with bigger bills. Furthermore, my apprenticeship pay budget wouldn't run to a brand new bike, so I had to consider another second-hand mount. These factors meant it was likely to be one from the popular Japanese 4. Exotica, like the Italian Benelli 252C or even more desirable 4-pot 254 version, were out of the question, as few folks had bought these new, so even fewer were for sale on the second-hand market. There are a couple of cheap oddballs around from Czechoslovakia and East Germany in the ill-designed shapes of the CZ250 Twin and MZ TS250-1. The bag of disassociated bits forming the CZ was considered a cheap but poorly built bike, very dated and generally awful. And the MZ, whilst quietly praised by some in the know, was also ridiculed for its crudeness, blocky looks and need to be attached to a sidecar. I was poor, but not destitute. So from the Japanese 4, the oldest produced model was the Suzuki GT250 range, which had originally been introduced in 1971. This shows a picture from a Suzuki brochure, and you can see it was good of Noel Gallagher to pose for the shoot. This screaming two-stroke was favoured by wannabe racers. However, unlike the similarly specified Yamaha, they didn't have Kenny Roberts on their side, just the words Ram Air. The much discussed replacement GT250X7 was also introduced in 1979, claiming to be the first 250cc production bike to reach 100 miles an hour. But as I recall, the chutzpah seemed to consist more of hope and hype than real actuality. Now I'll be surprised if that doesn't set my comment section below alight. Yamaha itself had the popular air-cooled RT250, which had been churning out since 1973, but Yams and their reputations were once again always too race-orientated. So second-hand ones came mostly pre-thrashed. At least I had a picture of one parked up in my collection. I cannot recall who took this award-winning shot. Not me, as that is me passing by on the right. I, however, took this shot of the next generation RD at the National Motor Museum in Bewley in 2019. This highly desirable, beautiful-looking, smooth-as-silk water-cooled RD250 variant was at least a year from emerging, so it was out of the picture in 1979. Or to be more precise, not yet in the picture. But I'm unapologetic in dropping the picture in here right now. Yamaha also produced their XS250 as shown here in one of their brochures. This was a 4-stroke model produced between 1977 and 1981. This engine type didn't rev so willingly as the 2-strokes and had lots of heavy engineering going on above the cylinder head, so often dismissed by teams due to their more ponderous nature. But it wasn't the engine, it was the styling that never appealed to me, despite the modern cast wheels. Unlike the other three Japanese manufacturers, Honda didn't build a two-stroke 250 road bike, only offering their four-stroke models. This contributed to Honda's reputation of being more reliable, if often with models a bit boring to look at. They had been producing their CB250 range since 1968, so plenty of these were still around when I was looking, but in 1978 they revived the classic Dream name when they produced the slightly bulbous CB250T Dream. This one shown here is in a Honda advert is actually a 400cc automatic version, but the styling was identical on the 250. The model was short-lived, so quite rare now, and within half a year had been replaced with the attractively styled Super Dream, launched in 1979 also in 250 and 400cc flavours, which did look good. This photo, taken at the Sammy Miller Museum, also shows a Super Dream in 400cc guides, but again they were pretty much identical, and the 250 supplied in greater numbers for the UK market as the CB250N, the designation to quote if you're a proper bike nerd. The trouble was that the Super Dream, whilst desirable, was less than a year old, so generally brand new and so very expensive for a poor kid on the block like me. But the most wanted Far Eastern bike to me was the Kawasaki, the KH250. It was noisy as a bag of rattled nails, exciting as dinner time, and boasted triple cylinders. It oozed sex appeal with its multi-exhaust layout, screaming two-stroke engine and tenuous but perceived links to the fantastic Halo model Z900 like this one I photographed in 1983. It ledged 20 miles to the gallon of the Whaling quarter triple litre, was pitiful and the reliability suspect, but it hit all the right notes in all the right order. I wanted to go with my instinct. The problem is with instinct is that old chestnut, practicality. I wasn't affluent enough to make passionate decisions and had to rely on my family to help finance the deal. This help came with the inevitable advice that came in the form of strong suggestions that I ought to buy a Honda, and it really shouldn't be as powerful as a 250cc. Why was not up for debate. I really didn't want a smaller engine than my 175cc Yamaha, so there was only one choice. Honda's 250 range of machines had two smaller capacity siblings. The awful, cheap-looking, late 60s styled pressed steel frame CD175 with its deeply varnished mudguards and an ugly fuel tank. That and the slightly bit less awful CB200, which was made between 1973 and 1976. I started my search, which was limited in those days to the few vehicles available that week in local newspaper adverts, and saw that Honda CB200 was up for sale. I was intrigued enough to telephone to make a visit and invited my father along for company and advice. In truth, I was going more out of curiosity than purpose. What I saw was this stock bike looking virtually brand new, despite being a couple of years old. It sported an S-plate, having been registered in late 1977, so it was probably one of the last ones off the line and sold in CB200B guise. Despite the late autumn viewing, it was presented shinier than a just polished bright thing in a buffed glass case in the glimmering sunlight of shimmering city. I noticed that it had a handy non-standard rear rack and a pair of "watch out, I'm just about to topple over" crash bars. My dad suggested they were practical, so I immediately decided they would have to go. I also noticed it had a very comfortable looking seat and a peculiar rubber styling feature that continued the seat padding up the middle of the tank, presumably so you could carry a monkey or something. But the thing that finally sold it was that the seller, upon hearing about my Yamaha trail bike, suggested we do a part exchange, as he had been looking for an off-roader for some time, some fun, and that would at least avoid me having to find a buyer. So I made a frankly stupid swift decision and left him with a deposit and ventured home with some hanging mild regret that it wasn't a Quacker 250. It didn't take me long to remember that despite the shiny newness, it was really an ugly mutt of a bike, designed primarily for commuting, and a model generally unloved, even by its owners. Clearly destined to eventually become a dispatch rider's mount, travelling thousands of miles a year caked in crud. The reasons for its obvious future was that it had good reliability from its basic, tried and tested parallel twin-cylinder power plant with a single overhead camshaft and final chain drive. But that's like saying Nora Batty is good at washing up. So what? And despite having dual carburetors and a modern 5-speed gearbox, its 200cc power was unremarkable. Plus the braking was mediocre due to its bulk and the weak single cable operated front disc brake. Upsides from my outgoing Yamaha was that it featured an actual 12-volt electrical system, so it could make use of its electric starter motor button instead of jumping around on the kickstarter. Plus, it had a 4-stroke engine, and it was red. Despite my earlier love of the Kawasaki triple, I have to admit the 4-stroke power is much better, unless your own desire is outright top speed, acceleration and earache. And Quacker Green is putrid. In time, I discovered the CB's most admirable quality was its comfort, particularly in comparison with the unforgiving seat of my previous trail bike. In fact, I now wonder whether the ease of riding distances, coupled to the, let's be generous, gentle power, helped form my love of touring mindlessly around rather than racing backwards and forwards between points B and A. Mind you, at 18 to 19, a man has to look cool, and a nondescript Honda did nothing for that. It needed something, anything. Improvement, and I soon started exploring the black art of customization, not in the sense of chromed engine bolts, lowered track or power enhancements, just a replacement exhaust and new headlamp, as can be seen in this later 1980 picture of my modified Honda, showcasing the CB headlamp unit and featuring the 2-in-1 upswept exhaust and, importantly, now removed crash bars. Notice I did keep the useful rack. As a result, it was much cooler. Still not cool. The original standard exhausts were low, uninspiring pipes running at low level parallel to the ground each side with unsightly oversized mufflers. My replacement exhaust was a custom designed 2-in-1 upswept stainless steel potent pipe terminating in a single-sided stubby megaphone which was louder and stylisher. Not many CB200 owners had bothered with them, so it made it distinctly different. The headlamp conversion was a CB unit from the famous French manufacturer who were making a name for themselves, producing replacement, big halogen-powered, concave, efficient, bright headlamps. Again, this added to the style, and additionally, let me see in the dark. But despite these lavish and relatively expensive enhancements, the Honda was still as ugly as a yak. Only the yak now had bigger horns. The bike did fulfil some requirements though. Its rear seat was shared a few times, and I put a number of new miles on the clock. In fact, these photographs, pre-exhaust swap, taken around late spring 1980, shows my father assisting in packing my bike, all ready to take to the road. All luggaged up, including taking spare helmets to safely collect female passengers en route. However, taking 2 spare helmets but having no spare seating was surely the definition of optimism. In my defence, 1 spare helmet was for me to loan out, and the other for something similar for my mates, who I was meeting up with to visit the Isle of Wight, as can be seen in this photograph, in which Jeff is with his Honda CB125 and Mark with his never really knew what it was oversized moped. However, I struggle to recall most of the trips travelled with any detail, so nondescript the ride was. I cannot even recall crashing the thing. Just as well, given my keenness to abandon the crash bar protection. The only off that I had, that I remembered, is when I tried to charge down one of my friends who had been terrorising my sister's boyfriend's party. Allow me to explain. My colleague Chris had been idly throwing a big knife into the kitchen wall due to a lack of ability to entertain himself properly at the party, and I chivalrously intervened. The result was that after being ejected from the property and consumption of a few more beers, Chris turned his attention to me and waited outside. In due course, I wanted to leave as well, and I suppose trying to run down a threatening, drunken yob stood just outside the gateway with a Bowie knife recently in his possession was a silly move. In my defence, despite many warnings, he refused point blank to clear out the way. I finally gave it full throttle to make him focus, the stubby megaphone blatting away for all it's worth, then dumped the clutch, at which point he twisted deftly to one side to let me go, but kicked out the Honda as I passed. His foot caught the rear of my front wheel, which sent me and bike in different directions. It was the only time I regretted the removal of the crash bars. He then proceeded to kick a man when he was down. How cheap. I would love to tell you that I leapt to my feet and battered the drunkard black and blue, but anyone who knows me would write a comment below and get this channel shut down. due to fraud. Instead, I writhed around on the ground and wondered why the kicks didn't actually hurt. Now, I know it was down to his soft trainers attempting to rain hail on my thick leather jacket and helmet. This garb was designed to keep me safe and protected while sliding down tarmac and bumping into inanimate objects at speeds up to 70 miles an hour, so passed the flimsy plimsoll test with ease. If I'd tried to kick him back, he would have surely suffered badly. I was wearing steel toe-cap motocross boots. However, frustration took its course, so Chris changed tack and decided to lay into the Honda instead. It suffered worse. 2 weeks later, after the intervention of our parents, Chris had been forced to pay for the damage repairs, and we're all mates again. Kids, eh? In time, the Honda was sold to a new keen owner, provided I removed that awful loud exhaust and huge headlamp. Thankfully, this predated eBay by several years, so I still had the original parts sat around in my bedroom. It seemed the buyer wanted an original yak. I'm not clear, but I don't think I even kept the machine for a full year, only having it from around November 1979 to about July 1980. In fact, the new or future owners didn't keep it that long themselves. DVLA records show that it became untaxed at the beginning of December 1981. The yak only roamed this earth for just 4 years. However, the last V5C registration document for the bike was issued in May 1984, so maybe it is undergoing a slow restoration in a shed somewhere, or more likely a slow death in the bush at the side of a field due to iron oxidation. So, as a conclusion, I should have bought the Quacker. I wouldn't have needed to change a thing. I would now probably be telling you a story about how I was innocently playing with my own knife when some do-gooder squealed to the host and got me kicked out of a party. Then tried to run me down. So in retribution, I bravely kicked the living daylights out of him and then did the same to his naff Honda. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this story of my Honda CB200. It wasn't my last bike, by any means, and I'm slowly working my way through them one at a time. Remember, a like, a comment below, and really importantly, subscribing to my channel is the best way to encourage me to get on with more content. Thanks for watching through this far. I hope you'll join me again. Bye.